Welcome everybody. Hoping everybody can see that. It says PPE for the mind. So this is the title of my presentation, and interestingly, lots of people presume it's one I've only just designed in the current context, but it's actually something I've been using for a couple of years. I first started using the title for the police because they call their stab vest and their camera and their shoes PPE for the body, so I thought that would make an excellent title. But up until now, of course, I've had to spend a lot of time explaining what PPE is. So I'm guessing now most people have heard this word. We're talking about it all the time, aren't we? As to the equipment that we need to protect people, particularly frontline people, against the COVID virus. That's incredibly important, obviously. But in my opinion, PPE for the mind is equally important, because if we don't protect our minds against distress, if we don't learn to understand our minds, then they, just like bodies, if I spent the rest of the year eating donuts, my body would become unfit for purpose. And in many ways, it's the same about the mind. So if you have a body, you also have a mind. So I'm hoping that everybody that's listening fits the category the same as me, as flawed human being. So if you're a flawed human being, then this presentation is for you, and I hope it will help you understand the way that your mind works and how you can protect it, both in times of anxiety and crisis, but also as you work to cope with your difficult situation, understanding your relative who has dementia and helping you to look after yourself within that context as well. So what is mind health in times of crisis? Well, perhaps this is what you think. If only you could be like this dog and just be really chilled despite what's going on, all would be well. So often when people come to see me clinically, that's essentially what they want. They want me to take away their feelings of anxiety and irritation, their anger, feeling low, the hurt and the loss of being in the situation that you're in. And in some ways, I'm sad to tell you that that isn't possible. But in another way, I'm pleased to tell you that, because often when people say, you know, my life would be perfect if I didn't feel so anxious, I remind them that it actually wouldn't. I often say to them, if I remove your anxiety with my virtual magic wand, you'd be dead by lunchtime, because actually you'd walk straight into the road or you'd drink Domestos bleach. Actually, feelings show us that we're human, but they also protect us. Guilt helps us to reflect on stuff that we've done wrong and help us to learn from our mistakes. Feeling low often tells us there's a problem and that we need to think about it. Sometimes feeling low just shows us that we're a fully functioning human being. If we didn't feel loss, we would be incapable of feeling love. So that's the bad news. I can't take away bad feelings, but I probably wouldn't want to, because that would diminish you. So what's realistic then? Well, for a number of years now, over a decade probably, I've been working in the acceptance and commitment therapy model. So that sounds a bit kind of odd, doesn't it? I don't think it's a great title in many ways, but it's actually just the most recent version of CBT. I'm sure many of you have heard of CBT, and I worked in that model for a long time, and for me it just didn't really hit the spot, particularly when people are really struggling with the most enormous pain. People like you who are experiencing the loss of the relative that they knew, and a lot of stress which comes with caring for somebody who's different and often demanding no time for yourself. So for me, the ACT approach is actually amazing. It really helped me. When I first stumbled across it, I was coping with a very difficult personal situation that I had no control over. No one could help me, and my mind was driven to despair pretty much kind of 19 hours out of the 24, if not more sometimes. So I found the ACT approach incredibly useful. So for a long time, I was my own guinea pig while I played about with it and decided whether, as a psychologist, this might have value. And actually, I realized very quickly that it very much helped me to manage my mind in a situation that was out of my control and very painful. So I then started to use it with other people I work with clinically, and I work with a lot of people who either have a neurological diagnosis like dementia or are living with somebody with it. So I like to feel that I know something of that. And also my father has dementia, so I understand to some extent what people are going with. So the ACT approach talks about these three elements as important for managing your own mind within this crisis of lockdown, but within the everyday grind of managing somebody with a dementia. Because for you, maybe many things haven't changed, and as other people are struggling with lockdown and having lost many of the things that are important to them, maybe you, like me, sometimes think, well, for people who've been in this situation of caring or locked within a neurological diagnosis, nothing much has changed for them. You've experienced enormous loss over many years. So nothing here is terribly difficult. I don't know. I know some people who are caring are liking lockdown much more than they did non-lockdown. I don't know what it's like for you, but these are three things that, whether you're liking lockdown or you're not liking lockdown, three things can really help you with whatever your situation is. So continuing with what's important, you might not even know what's important anymore. So I'm going to help you think about that a bit. Continuing with what's important, but with focus, because when you've got a difficult thing going on, the temptation is to be constantly distracted and hijacked by difficult thoughts and feelings around that thing. So what we need to do is know what's important and to do it with focus. But how on earth do we do that with all these difficult thoughts and feelings going on? You know, thoughts of, how am I going to cope? This is too difficult. No one else knows what I'm going through. How dare they suggest such patronizing advice? Or feelings of anxiety. You know, this is unmanageable, or feelings of guilt and shame when actually you shout at the person that you're caring or handle them a bit roughly, because actually it's blimmin' difficult to carry on with patience and kindness, which is probably what you'd like to do. So we're going to look at how you continue with what's important with focus, but also how you manage these hijacking thoughts and feelings that we all have. So how do you even know what's important? So up here, I've got 8 sentences, and the same 6-letter word is missing from every single sentence. So there's a 6-letter word that if we put it in there, knowing you're something makes life feel meaningful in times of crisis, helps you manage stress, makes you more effective, whatever your situation, improves your ability to stay cognitively focused, improves your concentration and your memory, improves your relationships, your weight, your physical fitness, and prevents you entering in some sort of mental crisis. So I've got 2 people who are here, 3 people, and I'm going to put this over to them. So Clara and Hugh, it's the same 6-letter word for each sentence. I don't know whether you have any ideas.
You said 6 letters?
6 letters, yeah.
I would say what I was thinking about. I was thinking about limits. No,
limits, that's a really good guess, and it's a common guess, but I'm afraid it's good, but not kind of quite on it. So, Hugh, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I don't. The word I would have gone to is happy. So knowing you're happy.
Happy,
okay.
okay.
It isn't the 6-letter word you were looking for, but it was what I would have.
Okay. So there's
got a 4-letter word. I couldn't think of a
What's the 4-letter word that you have, Sarah?
Mind.
Mind, yeah, that's a good guess. So sadly, Hugh, no one's happy. That's the best kept secret in Western society. I think the research shows we're happy for about 4% of the day. So the rest of the time we're flooded with an enormous range of emotions. So sorry about that, it's not happy. So the word is actually values. Now, the first time someone presented an enormous amount of research that backs these statements up, I thought that has to be a heap of junk. That cannot be true, that knowing your values helps with all of these things. But actually, the more workshops I do with such a range of people, I've recently done this ACT work with police, sort of hundreds of police officers. I work with a lot of carers, a lot of people with a neurological diagnosis, and then just people like me who are just average flawed humans. And actually I'm beginning to realize that this is true, and that often people really like this values piece that we'll talk about in a minute. So hold your judgment as we work on to think about that. So what do I mean by a value? Well, in many ways, the word values has been really hijacked, I think, by organizations and people like Donald Trump and other world leaders who throw this word out when they don't really mean it at all. So I want to just kind of bring it back and think, well, what do I mean by that? What do I want it to mean? How can that word help us in those sentences? So a value, as I mean it, is not what other people think. So my values are mine to choose. They're not what society tells me women should believe or professionals should believe, or what is politically correct at the moment. So I'm a little bit ashamed to confess that I don't much like animals. I'm not a big fan of small children, and you'll see by my plastic bottle that I'm not as committed to the environment as some of my friends would like me to be. I have used this bottle for 2 weeks, which is probably not great for my health. So I'm not buying one every half day, but I am using plastic still. So, you know, my values are not necessarily your values. My values, things that are important to me, are around relationships, connection. I'd like to think that I help by sharing information that I know as a psychologist and that perhaps other people don't know so well. I'd like to think I'm kind, I'm helpful, and I'm authentic. So what I say is what I mean. So they're values that are important to me. So your values are what are important to you, not what people say a carer should be like or what society thinks is fashionable at the moment. Also, an important thing is that values are things we want to express in our action. So if we can't express our values in our action, it's probably not a value. So think kind. How would I express that in a small action? So I don't know, make my husband a cup of tea, for instance. That would be kindness in action. So it's only a value if you can do it. And I'm not talking the big things here. I'm not talking about getting on a plane. Well, I couldn't do that, could I, even if I wanted to, and disappearing off to a third world country to start a care home there. I'm thinking of these tiny things that I can do even in lockdown with the connections that I have. So here are some few examples of my values at work. That's me actually at work rather than locked down. Obviously I can't see human beings at the moment, and that's my son there, my second son, explaining to our nephew some things around the phone. And when I told him what would your values be at home, he gave me some of those in green writing. Before you think I have the most perfect children who want to collude with everything I say, he did raise his eyebrows very highly to the sky before he told me those. So there's some examples of values. And you might look at them and think, yeah, they're my values too. Or you might think, no, I don't want those values. There's some common ones there. So that's all right, isn't it? you know, kind of, yeah, we want to be these kind of people, kind, helpful, sharing, caring kind of types, but it's not easy, is it? Because what happens, you know, I'll tell you about a very undramatic situation in my life yesterday when I got very hooked by some difficult thoughts and feelings. So I did a lot of webinars yesterday, and in the break, what I'd done in the morning to be really organized was to boil some eggs as a healthy snack, because physical health and self-care is one of my values. And so I was all good with that. I had 3 eggs lined up to run in and eat between webinars, because what I've realized is while I've been in lockdown, it's much easier to go in and grab some chocolate and shove that into my mouth. And actually my waistline is getting bigger and bigger. So it's a good job that you can only see me from not the waistline down, because you'd see a very tight skirt. So I ran in to get my eggs, feeling really good that I'd been so proactive about this. And what I find is an empty saucepan. So one of the rotten family members that I have to live with at the moment, and there are 4 adults, had nicked my eggs. And not only that they disappeared off to their bedrooms because they're such lazy tykes. So very quickly, I got incredibly hijacked by some difficult thoughts of anger and resentment and irritation. If I'd have had time, I could have quite happily gone into their rooms and got them up and strangled them. Such was Egggate in my house. Fortunately for them, I had to come straight back out and do another webinar. But, you know, I got really annoyed. I was thinking, like, they're so lazy, they're not doing anything, and they have the audacity to steal my healthy food. And now, of course, it's all I had available to me was Cadbury's chocolate and crisps. So I threw that down my neck pretty fast. And then I got back to my office and I was feeling really sick. And of course, that was their fault, wasn't it? So I was sitting in front of this screen feeling like they're so naughty and irritating and lazy. Maybe after lockdown, I'm actually going to commit my children to care, the ones that are young enough, and the ones that are old enough, I'm going to throw dramatically out of my house and divorce my husband, because after all, I didn't know if it was him that had eaten my eggs. And then by the time I calmed down, ready to do this kind of, you know, how to look after your minds in lockdown presentation, I realized that I was quite ashamed, really. I was thinking, blimey, if all those people out there like you listening to me knew how irritated I got and the angry feelings that hijacked me, you might not want to listen to my top tips. But then I thought, actually, this is quite a good example, isn't it? Because we want to kind of make these moves towards the person I want to be. So what I'm calling a towards move is when I do something that's in line with my values. So when I'm kind or helpful or patient or considerate, then I'm making a towards move, because what we know is the more towards moves we make, the more meaningful life feels. But what happens really super quickly is we get hijacked by our inside stuff, don't we? And it doesn't have to be the big stuff. And before we know it, we're making moves that are away from our values. We're our worst version. And then we start to feel shame and self-loathing. And then we do whatever we do in our shame and self-loathing. Mine is chocolate eating or online shopping. I don't know what yours is, bit of blaming others. That's another favorite thing to get rid of my bad feelings. So this is kind of how we roll, isn't it, as human beings? So one of the things we're going to talk about in this presentation is how we disentangle from those difficult inside stuff. So it's kind of like this, isn't it? This is the difficult thought and feeling monster, and he's out to get you in lockdown because he's bored as well. So, you know, and there's me kind of looking a bit more male, but kind of struggling with all my difficult thoughts and feelings. And actually, I have no freedom when I'm kind of engaged with this massive struggle with my difficult thoughts and feelings. I have no room to turn around and read something interesting or go out for a walk or plan a webinar because I'm so uptight with all my stuff. Do you relate to that? Kind of getting totally hijacked. So you're just stuck in your head, ranting and raving and losing sleep. So we can't choose our thoughts and feelings, can we? We can't choose happiness and patience because, yeah, we get super hijacked. So this is a way, just kind of reflect on this, because this will help you think, well, what and who is actually important. Because one of the problems when we're in times of stress is we tend to lose contact with what actually is important in our lives and who we want to be. What would our best version look like? So imagine this, if it was legal that I've hidden some CCTV in your house, and at the end of lockdown or at the end of your, I don't know, month, we're going to sit down on a screen and we're going to watch this, maybe in public, on a public webinar, or maybe just privately, you and me and a few friends. So how would you like to see me treating people in your space? Not because you're guilty of other people seeing and you've got stuff to hide, because we all have that, but how in your heart's desire would you like people to see you treating the person you're caring for, or yourself, or the other people that you're having contact with on FaceTime or on the phone? If you're still working alongside your caring, how would you like to create some boundaries around that? Who would you choose to spend time with on the phone or on FaceTime? What would you be saying? How would you be saying it? Would you be ranting at a professional that was trying to help you? Would you be taking out your resentment on your friend or your daughter? Or would you actually be engaging in more helpful conversation? If you have any leisure time, so just maybe half an hour in a day, how do you want to spend it? How do you want to treat yourself in that time? How would you be moving? You know, how much would you choose to be moving? Would you stay in the chair? Would you stay in your bed? Or would you choose to kind of just move your body to the best of your ability? What would you stop doing? What would you be putting in your mouth? How much would you be hydrating yourself? How much would you be feeding yourself? Whatever your situation is today, whether you're a carer, whether you're someone with dementia, whether you're a professional listening in, you know, what questions would you want to ask yourself? So I'm just aware that I've been tuning my conversation to people with dementia and their carers when I'm supposed to be talking to professionals. So I apologize to that, because I've done so many of these webinars, but everything I've said is still the truth for all our flawed humans. So there's some questions you can ask yourself towards the end of the day. This presentation will be available for you to look at. So in order to be our best versions, to be in tune with our values, we need to recognize that we can do that with focus, or alternatively, we're hijacked and distracted. So I'm guessing most of you have cars. If those of you who don't, you might have a bike, but you at least know about gears. So if I asked you about gears and what's the best gear? Fifth gear, first gear? So presumably you would tell me it depends on the context. So I live right down on the south of, in the south of England, on the south coast. If I wanted to drive to London or up north, what gear would I need to be in? Well, that would change, wouldn't it? So I might attempt to drive out of my very small drive in fifth gear, but what would happen would be very similar to what happened a few days ago when I crashed into the fence of the Indian takeaway instead of going smoothly up my drive. So fortunately there was no casualties, just some insurance trickiness, but that wasn't the right gear to be using. And alternatively, if I'm progressing up the M1 in first gear, my engine would probably be very noisy, it would blow up. So there's an issue here, isn't there, with we need to be choosing the right gear for the right context. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever thought about this or been told about this, but you actually have two gears available to you in your mind. You have thinking gear, and that's really great. We want thinking gear because thinking gear has enabled you to be where you are right now. So at some point today, whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching it later on, you have planned to get in front of this screen. And in order to do that, you'd have had to get yourself up, get yourself dressed, put aside other things, arrange things with family members, perhaps, to create the space to do this. So you've had goals, you've analysed, you've planned, you've done some mental time travel, you've thought back to yesterday, where was that Zoom invite that I need? You've thought about later today, I need to turn my computer on at 12:30 to get to watch this later, or 11:30 to watch it live. So we need that thinking gear. We don't want to lose that. But you know, often in Western society particularly, as adults, we have practiced thinking gear for 30 years. We are born into sensing gear. If you've ever watched a toddler, you'll see that they are always in the present, aware of what's going on right now. So when Costa was still open, I have a strong memory of being outside Costa, and the mum was trying to get in Costa, and the little boy had noticed there was a little ant on the floor and had bent right over to watch this ant, and the mum was desperately trying to tug him into the future, which was going to be her cup of coffee in Costa. So children are born in sensing gear and have very little ability to worry about the next 10 minutes, which is great for them, and why young children rarely have mental health problems unless they're in a difficult situation. But as adults, we learn to get more and more into thinking gear. So often we're in thinking gear for 90% of our day. If I plugged a memory stick in your brain and downloaded it, how much time are you in sensing gear? So in sensing gear, you're in your 5 senses. Maybe now you're listening to me, maybe you're not, maybe you're playing on your phone, multitasking, thinking about the future this afternoon. So it's so easy because our default mode is zombieing, not paying attention, and mostly in thinking gear. And when we're in thinking gear inappropriately, it looks a bit like this. So maybe I'm at my Pilates session, either on webinar or just on my own, and my mind says, you've got 7 loads of washing to do and 2 webinars to plan. So I'm not getting anything out of the exercise. Maybe I'm thinking about the food or drink I can shove down my mouth later. Maybe I'm not paying attention when I've got a child or a grandchild on FaceTime, or when we're out of lock time, we're thinking about other things. Do you recognize yourself in some of these scenarios? Because what happens when you're in the wrong gear, when you're in thinking gear, when you should be in sensing gear, you'll have a real sense of restlessness. You'll be worrying, you'll be ruminating, and actually it's not good for our brains. There's been some recent scans where they've looked at somebody in a scanner and they've asked them to think about yesterday, do lots of planning, do thinking about tomorrow, and their brain is fully firing up. Lots of the frontal lobes and the connections between the front of the brain and the middle of the brain, they're all firing up in lots of colors, which shows we're ready to go. We're on hyper alert, hyper vigilant. And if we're in that state when we're about to run a race or do something important, that's all great. But when we're in that state when we should be having a meal with our family or doing a Pilates session, it isn't great. And we feel stressed and anxious and restless. So we need to learn to get into sensing mode, because our default is often thinking mode. So what we need to first do is notice that we have 2 gears, so that we can then begin to see, I'm in the wrong gear. Just like when I'm in my car and I've forgotten to change gear, which I do often, particularly on zombie mode. I'm on 3rd gear, I need to be in 5th gear, and my engine starts to go, you know, it tells you that it's not happy. So the more we start to notice and gain awareness, the more we'll see we're in the wrong gear, and we can shift on purpose. So when we notice we've been hijacked by our inside stuff, or we're feeling restless and agitated, out of control, we've got too many windows open, that's what our mind is trying to tell us. We need to get into sensing mode. So I'm just going to invite you right now to do that. So if you're comfortable, it's much easier to do this exercise when you're closing your eyes, so you're not distracted. But if not, just stare into space. So we're going to go into sensing mode, and just by doing that, just wiggle yourself about in your chair. Just have a bit of a stretch. It's not great, is it, sitting in front of webinars all the time? Move your arms about, move your neck, move your head. Just push your feet down hard. And then just kind of notice your mind right now. Is it busy? Is it rushing? Is it wondering what's coming next? What's this woman going to do to me while I've got my eyes closed? Or is it still? And then just notice your body. So notice you have a body without looking. Just notice that you're breathing. And notice a few breaths. Notice which parts of your body move as you breathe in. And then notice which body parts move as you breathe out. Just keep your attention on your breathing for a minute. I'm not trying to change it or relax. We're just trying to notice, wake up to what's there. Notice if you can taste anything. Take a big in-breath and notice if you can smell anything. Notice what you can hear. Notice the position of your hands and whether your hands are the same temperature or different. And then just notice any pain or discomfort in your body. And see if you can just kind of notice it's there rather than struggle and be annoyed with it. Notice where it actually is. And then when you're ready, come back. And just connect again with your body. So kind of have a nice stretch. Stretch your neck. Getting so stiff, kind of keep sitting in front of screens. And then just re-engage. So re-engage your focus with me. Notice I'm here, you and me are in this weird virtual interaction. And just see if you can bring yourself back to this moment and engage with me. So if you were live, I'd ask you what you noticed there. And what people mostly say is I'll stay there for a bit. They've noticed either that it was nice, it was a brain pause, sometimes it is. Other people will say they can't do it. That's how sometimes people have tried something called mindfulness and then decided it's not for them. But if they've noticed that, it is for them, because actually we are flabby. So, we've got to get good at this. Our mode of default is zombie, rushing around in thinking mode. So this doesn't come natural. But, if you were able to notice anything there, notice your body or what you could hear, you got into sensing mode, even if it was just for 1 second. So you can practice that. So here's some easy ways to get into sensing mode quickly. So this doesn't take any time. You can do that anyhow you like. So you can listen for a few sounds. You can focus on a body part, push your feet down, and just notice where you are for 1 second. Eat something tasty and really notice it. Notice even what it sounds like in your mouth, what it tastes like. And that's a mental sit-up. We can notice very easily. A quick way to notice when we're in the wrong gear, when we're in thinking gear, is when we're in our mind TARDIS. So if you're thinking about something 10 minutes ago, even earlier in this presentation, but certainly before it or this morning, you've jumped in your mind TARDIS and you've gone back. So any memories or past images or regrets, you're in your mind TARDIS. If you're thinking about what you have to do this afternoon, calls you have to make, what you've got to cook for your tea, or worrying about stuff, how you're going to cope with being in lockdown for another few weeks, or what it's going to be like when you come out, you're futuring. You've jumped in that mind TARDIS and you've zipped off to the future. How much time do you spend in your mind TARDIS rather than in sensing mode, engaging and focusing on what you need to be doing? Why is that a problem? Well, if you're not here right now, then you're missing out on something. you might not like what you're getting, but you never know, it might be something good. But also, what are your relationships going to be like if you're constantly disengaged, disconnected, absent from what's happening? Probably not that great. What are your patient consultations going to be like? Probably not that great. So, once upon a time, a very long time ago, for some unknown reason, I thought it would be a good idea to consult a personal trainer. And he was very fit and he had a really great six-pack and he had his shirt off. I guess he wanted to show his wares. I didn't have a six-pack and I asked him how to get one and he showed me just like that with quite an aggressive look on his face. It was quite scary. Anyway, after I came out of his room, I had everything I needed to do lots of sit-ups and I could have had a proper good six-pack, but I won't show you. I haven't got one. 30 years later, I've never done a single sit-up and I don't much care. It hasn't improved or disproved the quality of my life. But hey, this is the same with our mental core. So we are in a default place of having very flabby mental cores because we are always in thinking mode and we're not practicing getting into sensing mode. Sometimes we're in sensing mode when we should be in thinking mode. That's me staring out at my neighbour's garden when I should be planning a webinar. So, you know, we can be in the wrong place at the wrong time with either. But for most of us, we're in thinking mode too much. So we need to learn to do mental sit-ups. Sorry, that was my best shot at finding a zombie nurse. So I hope you're not too offended. But you know, that's what we're like most of the time. What do zombies do? They just run around reacting, grabbing what's in front of them. If it's nice food, they're shoving it in their mouth. If it's a bad feeling like anxiety, they're pushing it away. They don't want to see it. And kind of being in zombie mode, we can't take care of ourselves. We can't be patient and kind with our colleagues or other people. It's not great. No healthy self-interest. So what would mental sit-ups be like? Well, just like the few things I've put in the last slide, but also this. So I often encourage people to try bringing their five senses to a regular routine. So for me, that's showering. So as soon as the shower door clicks shut, that's my cue to try and be into sensing mode. So to just notice the smell of the shower gel, to notice the sound of the water, to notice what else I can hear, to notice what it feels like to move my body as I wash myself. Now, some days I last for 1 second, and before I get to the end of my shower, I realize I've been back in thinking mode the whole time. But every day I practice, it gets a bit stronger, and now I've been doing that for 14 years. Most days I can shower fully in sensing mode, so my mental core is much better than my physical core. Some people really like the mindfulness apps like Headspace and Calm. Personally, I really don't. It doesn't work for me, but you can try those. They're easily downloadable. A lot of them are free. The other thing you can do is what I did a couple of times in this webinar already. So what I call a pod. So a pause, say pause. And then just observe your own body quickly. Observe your own mind. Notice any thoughts. Connect, stretch. Notice. And then refocus on whatever you need to refocus. And that can be enormously helpful. So just imagine if you did one of those sit-ups every time you went to the toilet, a quick pod, and you also hand washing, we're all doing a lot of that at the moment, that you did a quick mental core sit-up with your hand washing. So then you'd have done lots of mental sit-ups during the day with no wasted time. Once a doctor told me, I did a big seminar, I think it was for GPs, and one of them said, I don't have time for this in my very busy day. And so I suggested to him that he could do it when he had a poo. Because, you know, I can't believe that there's a flawed human, doctor, nurse, whatever, out there who doesn't have a poo from time to time. So, you know, you can notice the warmth of the seat. on your bits of your body. You can notice the angle you're sitting. You can notice any pictures in the space. You can notice the rather large plop or the very small squidgy plop, whatever's going on for you right then, and you can experience the smell. And hey, that will be a mental sit-up that you'll have won without any time wasted. So this isn't stuff we need to set a time for. So that's just a pod in a slightly more detail so you can check back at it. So the problem is, our mental core's not great. We're spending a lot of time thinking and fighting with difficult thoughts and feelings because we don't like them. The bad news is you can read 100 books on positive thinking, your mind will still be negative, because our minds are attracted to negative stuff like Velcro. Positive stuff slips off like Teflon. And if you stand in front of the mirror saying, way, you're kind of a real love God, he's amazing, and you've got a great body and you're really on it, your mind will say, no, you haven't. So then you've added a negative thought to your positivity. So increasingly, the research is showing that challenging negative thoughts doesn't really help that much and may make things worse, particularly if you've got a tendency towards negativity. So this bloke's only hope is to drop the rope. So we've got to learn to drop the rope, disentangle from our difficult thoughts and feelings. So I'm going to fly through a few techniques how you can sort your negative thoughts and feelings, not get rid of them, but you can lose their power and influence over your actions. So this is quite weird. If you've got a piece of paper, put it landscape, and then write your darkest thought in the bottom right corner where I've done it. So I'm putting, how embarrassing, I did the first 10 minutes as a dementia carer website. You can put, if you've got fears about lockdown or whatever. So write it down like that in the corner there and notice what it feels like. So for some of you, just writing that down, it will throw up some anxiety. So just notice that in your body. We don't really like these dark thoughts. We try and avoid them, don't we? We try not to think about them. So this is odd, isn't it? But this actually helps more than avoidance. So can I ask you, Hugh, I'm not going to ask you your dark thought, but can I ask you what it's like to just write it down? Are you feeling some anxiety feelings coming up, or?
Yeah, a little bit. I think it's difficult to get it out of your mind when you write it down and you acknowledge it.
Yeah, so it's a bit freaky at the start. So try this. In front of it, can you write that? I am having the thought that. So I'm then going to read out. You can do this in your own mind, or if you're on your own at home, you can do it out loud. I am having the thought that I was very embarrassed to do the wrong webinar. I am having the thought that, how embarrassing to do the wrong webinar. So Hugh, what's it like when you put I am having the thought that before it?
I think for mine, it's still quite difficult because I'm not so much worried about myself getting the virus. So I'd put down my baby getting ill with the virus. So obviously it doesn't really affect it as much, but it still makes it difficult, you know. It's acknowledging the anxiety.
Okay, how about you, Clara?
Sorry. Yes, writing this before, yeah, my thought was absolutely self-centered. So writing this before helps to take a little bit of distance from it, I think.
Yeah, take it. So Hugh, your thought is really massive and scary, and this technique will help a little bit if you practice it, actually. But those big scary thoughts, often, you know, you've got to do a lot of practice acknowledging this thought and sitting with it before it will diffuse it. But my little thought about the webinar shame, I mean, a few years ago I would have sat in shame for the rest of the day, beating myself up about that. But for me, it just kind of diminishes that thought a little bit. And then try this one. So just again put in, I notice that I'm having the thought that, and your thought. And then just say that in your head 2 or 3 times. And then can I come back to you guys and just ask about again, what's that like?
Yeah, I think for me it starts to put a bit of context and a bit of separation from the problem, and it starts to make it feel a bit more manageable.
Yeah, I mean, you know, these big dark thoughts are not going to go away quickly, and this can feel quite trivial for the really big stuff, especially doing it quickly like that. But you'd be surprised, the more you practice it, and actually even if you write it out like lines, because what we tend to do is we have a dark thought, we don't want to look at it, we don't want to experience it, so we spend a lot of our day tied up with trying to push it away. And when we try and push thoughts away, it's a bit like the rope man. We have no time to do anything else, or we do what we do to get rid of difficult stuff. So for me, that's eating too much. So heads back in the fridge without even recognizing I've had that thought. So the reason we want to do this is to disentangle ourselves a bit, to just have a bit of wiggle room over our actions, so these dark thoughts don't drive us to the places we don't want to do and that make us more self-loathing. This is another rather weird one. So this word that has become a rotten word that we don't really want to process very much. So lots of people are telling me they can't even say this word without it producing some quite panicky feelings. So I just want to do something really odd with it. And I just want you to help me say it out loud. So hopefully my panel will be willing to make themselves look a bit silly, and you can do this at home. So when I say go, we're just going to kind of say this word over and over again for a few seconds. And we're going to do it in silly voices and loud voices and quiet voices and deep voices and high voices, and just see. So kind of when you say it like COVID, that sounds quite scary. It's very attached to its semantic properties. It's viral, it's catching, it could hurt the people we love. So let's just say this out loud a few times. Say go. COVID, 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 COVID. COVID, COVID, COVID. COVID, 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 COVID. COVID, 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 COVID. So what's that like when you now say it? Say it out loud now just once. COVID.
COVID.
What happens to the word?
Loses its power.
Loses it a bit, doesn't it? It kind of takes it away from the word and the meaning, because at the end of the day, we've just attached some random sounds that last year, if I'd have walked up to you and gone COVID, you'd have thought, well, she's pretty weird. And then you'd have walked away, and that wouldn't have meant anything to you. It was just some sounds. It was just a word. So we've done something in our heads with that word, haven't we? So this is a way you can kind of what we call diffuse from this word. So get a little bit of wiggle room to do some important stuff. So once you start getting into sensing more often and doing some pods, you will notice these powerful, scary thoughts that ruin you. So you can then just ask them. I've got a post-it up there that you can't see that says, is this a useful or helpful thought to me right now? So a thought about protecting my family might be a good thought when they all come home and I need to moan at them about washing their hands, but it isn't actually helping me do this webinar. It's a distraction. We can ask ourselves, if I buy into this thought as the absolute truth, how will that make me act towards myself or others? So I revisit my thought. How embarrassing to ruin a webinar. So if I buy into that as the absolute truth all day, that's going to really make myself, feel rubbish. I'm going to beat myself up. I might even refuse the webinar invites that are in my inbox. They won't do anything helpful. Probably treat my family a bit more resentfully. It'll be Egggate all over again because I'm in a bad mood. It's not going to help me. We can ask ourselves, is this an old story? I mean, part of that is, yeah, you're a rubbish psychologist. I mean, that thought comes to me at least 79 times a day. So that's an old thought. I can just thank my mind for that. Oh, yeah, it's the rubbish psychologist thought. Well, hey, So you can kind of start to relate to your mind as if it's the Daily Mail. I'm sorry if you like the Daily Mail. I don't really like the Daily Mail. I think it mostly produces a heap of junk. So when I see a headline in the Daily Mail that says something, I think, that's probably not true, or that's probably a bit rubbish, and then I don't believe it. But when my mind throws out a headline, why do I believe that like it's the absolute solid truth? Because I'm a flawed human. So isn't it interesting? People just want to be happy. They say, oh, I just want my babies to be happy. It's like, well, that would give them a really diminished life, wouldn't it? No other emotions apart from bland and happy. They'd be like a McDonald's worker that just says, have a nice day. How sad would that be? But we don't like difficult feelings. If I say, I'm really worried about my family catching this, people go, no, don't worry. Your kids are really robust. They're teenagers. You know, it's like, all right, then I won't worry. Wouldn't that be marvelous? If you could call me up as a psychologist and say, I'm really worried, and I could just go, don't worry. And then you could just phone off, and that would be a really cool strategy. What a ridiculous thing that we say to people, you know, it'll be all right. Well, I can't reassure you it'll be all right. You might get COVID this afternoon, I'm afraid. That would be a lie if I said you'll be all right. It doesn't even help, and it just makes us more scary. So, you know, we can't help our feelings. We can't turn them off. We can't tell other people to turn them off. So what do we miss out on when we're struggling to not have them, or telling other people not to have them? A really useful video here is Russ Harris's The Struggle Switch. It's on YouTube. Have a check of it later. It's only 3 minutes long. It's really good. So imagine you're describing this object to somebody who's blind. So just quick few thoughts, Hugh and Sarah and Clara. How would you describe this to me if I couldn't see it?
Red, square, angry.
Cool. How do you know it's angry?
Eyebrow.
Some eyebrows?
Yeah, I would say he's mocking someone.
Okay. So kind of notice there what's happening is your mind is instantly going in with judgments, isn't it? It's like we started off with, it's just actually a red square with some black squiggles on, but my mind says, maybe he's angry, or maybe he's like judging somebody, and this is what our minds do so quickly. And what we want to aim to do with our feelings is we want to just kind of notice them. Because actually the feeling of anxiety is the same as when you come out of an aerobics class, pretty much, physiologically. So, but we judge them differently. Oh, that's nice, that's exercise. Oh, this is anxiety. It's really scary. I don't want anxiety. Maybe my anxiety will get even bigger. Now I feel guilty because I've got anxiety. So when we look at our body feelings, we want to kind of try and notice them objectively. And we don't have much time to do this, but we'll maybe do it really quickly just so we can show. So panel, guys out there, think of something really small that's aroused some difficult emotion. So don't go thinking of a really big trauma. Thinking of something like my egg gate, where you get really annoyed with somebody over something. See if you can just close your eyes and notice that feeling. So really bring to mind that memory of whatever happened that made you a bit anxious. Put some color to it. Remember what you were wearing, what they were wearing, what they said. So do you notice anything in your body? So just see if you can notice the feelings that are actually coming up. So notice that you're breathing. Push your feet down. Notice this feeling as if it's that red cube. So just notice where in your body it is. Notice how much space it takes up. If you had to take a big pen and draw an outline, how big would that space take up? And then just again, notice that you and me are here. Notice you've got a body. Have a bit of a stretch. Notice you've got a body around these difficult feelings. And then come back and engage, refocus. So it's hard to do that in a quick way, but you can practice that a bit more. And some people would say to me, Why do you want to tune into your bad feelings? How weird is that? Are you a masochist or something? But the reason we want to do that is because struggling with them and trying to get rid of them and push them away makes us be like the man with the rope that can do nothing else. So we want to disentangle to get on with our valued direction. So that's the reason we want to create more distance. If I put a gun to your head and said, I'll shoot you if you feel anxious, you wouldn't be able to control your anxiety. But you could sing happy birthday because you can control your actions even when you have difficult thoughts and feelings. You can control your arms and your legs and your mouth and do what's important. So finally, I wonder if you're a good friend to yourself. Imagine this. Think of somebody you've recently supported. They came round, they burst into tears or said, I'm really terrified. How many of these things did you do? Did you laugh at their misery? Did you say, for goodness sake, you're such an idiot? Or shut up, you boring cow? Or give them a blade to hurt themselves? Or force them to withdraw from everybody? Insist they work a bit harder? Feed them junk food until they were sick? Pour a bottle of vodka down their throat? Did you do any of those things? Well, if you did 5 or 7 of those, you're a rubbish mate. If you did 1 or 2, you could do better. If you did none, you're a good friend, and I'd like you to be my friend. Now, you're probably thinking, how ridiculous. Of course, I wouldn't do any of those things. What about when you're suffering? How to treat yourself? Are you a good mate to yourself? Or do you beat yourself up? Well, why are you so pathetic? Everybody else is coping with lockdown. Why can't you get on with your work? You're really ridiculous. Have a bottle of wine. Eat some more junk food. Make yourself ill. Hide in your bed all weekend because you can't face yourself. Does that help? So I'm sorry to put this up because it's a bit mocking, isn't it, at the moment? I mean, who wouldn't like to go on holiday on a plane to somewhere very nice, but we can't. But, you know, if you've ever been on a flight, you'll remember what they say. If we're in trouble, put your own mask on first. That feels very puzzling when you're first on there with your new child and you think, I'd reach out and save my child first. But you couldn't save your child, could you? If you die of lack of oxygen, you'd pass out and your child would die as well. And it's the same for everyone you care for. If you don't first put your own oxygen mask on, you can't help anyone else. So just start to notice when you beat yourself up and you do things that are really quite self-harming. And just see if you can say, be kinder, be a better mate to yourself. So let's have one more pause. Just notice. Just get into sensing mode. The body is always there as the doorway to sensing. Notice you are breathing. Push your feet down. Just notice what's on your mind. Notice your body. And then come back, connect, re-engage, and decide what's important right now. What you're going to do as soon as this webinar is finished that will be value driven. Maybe go around and go away and download a really good novel on your Kindle because it's £1.98 on Kindle, and I wrote it especially for lockdown. That's a lie, but it's about psychology and neurology. So if you like that, there's a thing. There's some more helpful resources. So that little book is for children to better understand dementia. Shrinking the Smirch is a good book for carers or professionals around managing your head. It's what I wrote when I first got into ACT and I was struggling with a really difficult situation. The ACT Companion app is actually free for lockdown. It's usually £7. Sleep Book is an amazing book for yourselves or to recommend to your patients. The Reality Slap is the same. And Help Someone I Love Has Dementia is actually I wrote it for a Christian organisation, so don't recommend it to people who are very committed to their atheism or another religion or whatever. But if you have patients who are Christians or are not offended by the Christian faith, that's just a 30-page little booklet on a faith-related thing. So thank you very much. Hope I haven't gone too much over time.
Thank you very much.
It's been good to be here.
That was fantastic. Thank you. Clara, I shall hand over to you just to finish off the session for today.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And as I normally do, I will just give a brief overview of some of the resources available, particularly for healthcare workers, designed for their taking care of their mental well-being. So first of all, these 3 papers on the impact the situation is having on health workers' mental health. They are, the 3 of them, very interesting. One of them comes from the first outbreak in Wuhan, and the other ones are already from Europe. This is the World Health Organization tips and rules regarding taking care of health workers. And I highly recommend this website from the Mental Health at Work in the UK. It is very well organized, really easy to look. You can filter what you're looking for. You can also kind of model to your workplace setting to find the appropriate tips for you. And here, this link is for if you're having any trouble with sleeping, particularly if you're you're having to do more shifts than usually, that normally disturbs sleep a lot. This is from New Zealand, and I put it here because these 2 toolkits are really, really nice, really easy to look, and they even look happy, the graphics they use and everything. So I think they are really cute and easy to read. And then for people that is in charge of teams, like nurse teams, departments in hospitals, dementia units, there's a lot of information here on how to ensure that all your team goes through this in the better way possible. There's even a webinar for the impact of this situation in medical students, because they have been taken out of hospitals many times. So we also have to deal with that. There's also interesting stuff in the website of the Royal College of Physicians of Edinburgh. And the Intensive Care Society has a lot of printable posters or infographics that really look great to hang in the wall in the units we are working now. Just on a more personal frame now, if you want to have a healing read when you get back home exhausted, this little book of well-being is really nice to look at. It's available and it's short and easy to read. There's a lot of videos, webinars, and audios that you can use to know how to cope with stress. So this is advice to hospital staff from UCL. There's also this website of the Association of Anesthetists that is really good. And there's also an interesting video, Surviving COVID-19. If you want to get more deep on this, there's even little courses you can make, like in the website of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, and also this website for nurses and midwives. The interesting thing of this is that they have a self-care plan, so you can complete it step by step. If you have problems organizing yourself, that may help. This is also a course addressed to nurses, and they also recommend videos that are designed for mindfulness or breathing exercise when you're wearing your physical PPE. So I thought this can be very useful, because I guess wearing this all day long must be overwhelming and exhausting. So being able to relax when you just want to get rid of it, it's probably really useful. And just finally, remind about this website, the Second Victim Support, in case you feel like you are really messed up with a patient or you're not dealing well. They are completely devoted to this kind of situation already before the crisis, but now more. And there are some resources also for asking for help, like this emotional support from the NHS, and also Every Mind Matters, this app, and you can get also urgent support. So thank you for everyone that is working in the front line, and we hope you can keep your mental health working and hang on, because this is going to be over soon, I hope. Bye.
Thank you very much, Clara. That's fantastic amount and wealth of information that you've got there. I'd like to say thank you to Joe and Clara and Hugh for being a guinea pig. We really do appreciate it, and we hope you all have a great weekend. So take care and stay safe. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.